I binge watched the first 5 episodes of Picard, and there's a lot to unpack here. Just a small thing before we get started. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, share and leave me a comment down below. So yesterday, after seeing some scenes from Star Trek Picard Season 2, I decided to have a look at it because it featured Brent Spiner in the role of Dr. Noonien Sung's grandfather, which made me really interesting because a while ago on Twitter I pitched to Brent Spiner to create a spin-off series of Star Trek playing in the pre-space travel era, covering the history of the creation of the augments and what leads to the augment war. After having seen parts of episode 5 of the new season, which actually featured him in exactly the role basically I pitched to him, I got really interested whether it was something in there which I had suggested on Twitter. So I binge watched the entire 5 episodes. And there is a lot of really interesting things which promise really nice changes for season 3 of Star Trek Picard. So digging in episode 1 of season 2 of Picard was pretty disappointing. All the things I still didn't like from Star Trek Discovery and the first season, like the dark tone, color set in general, then that a captain of a Federation spaceship is setting a cigar on fire on the bridge.
Captain.
Dale. Make it so.
Which we know from Star Trek The Next Generation would trigger the fire control systems and lasers would shoot out of the walls, extinguishing the fire of his cigar immediately. Some people criticized and pointed out that in one episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, it was explicitly mentioned that in the 24th century, people would not abuse tobacco anymore and nicotine addiction would have gone extinct. However, we see that also other highly addictive substances like alcohol are still produced, only with the difference that it's now for purely joyful recreational purposes, like for instance Jean-Luc Picard's vineyard. We have to notice that there are no kiosks with cigarette packages in Star Trek Picard either. Rios carries a cigar around. It is very possible that those cigars are produced somewhere on Cuba or so by relatives of Rios. For the same purpose, Jean-Luc Picard runs his vineyard. Nevertheless, carrying cigars and on a Federation starship and setting them on fire is something which I'm pretty sure does not comply with Starfleet code. Then the abomination, the Borg Queen.
We wish for peace.
Was also a pretty much what the hell is that moment. But episode 2 was a nice change in the second half of the episode. The episode is called Penance, and going over the episode more than once, I noticed they probably don't mean penance for Picard, but penance for the creators of the show. Like for instance the subtle retcon of Discovery by not mentioning Sarek having an adoptive daughter.
And Sarek, Director Sarek,
decapitated on the steps of the Vulcan Science Academy in front of a crowd that included his wife and son.
Or the acknowledgement that there are no time crystals.
I'm afraid my cursory review of Confederation briefs made no mention of any time travel capabilities.
and mentioning canonically accepted methods for time travel.
Well, there are cruder methods of time travel. Star's gravitational pull, a slingshot maneuver at warp to generate a temporal fissure. Kirk's Enterprise did it on more than one occasion.
Or them simply admitting that the thing that we saw in the previous episode is not how the actual Borg Queen is supposed to look.
Jurati and the Borg Queen from the Stargazer.
No, this one's more typical.
Important from here on is also to note that the color set of the entire show changes dramatically and stays this way for the following episodes. The lighting is more like we're used to from normal Star Trek. It's not this dark, cold, bluish, ambient lighting. It's a nice, bright color set. It seems they really want to tell us we want to change things from here on. That's our penance. We acknowledge canon, we stick to the methods of time travel, the visuals you're used to, and they finally kill off the ninja space elf, which was a total rip-off from the beginning anyway from Lord of the Rings. We can see that the new writer they got really tries, he tries. But of course, we have to acknowledge, and he acknowledges it too, that you cannot just make a cold reboot, just go hard 180 degrees and just ignore everything which happened in the previous season. So he has, we have to understand that he has right now to be very creative and write himself out of this really shitty corner those hacks writing season 1 have written themselves into. And we can see the awareness reflected in the dialogue.
I'm on an ongoing mission to explore strange new worlds, seek out new life and civilizations, but instead I'm stuck back in a particularly primitive past, no offense, trying to correct the timeline so I can, With whom, you ask? A ragtag group of misfits, including one cybernetic queen that I'm fairly certain is in it just to wipe out all of humanity with her own cohort. A crusty old admiral, who, if I understand it correctly, is now a flesh and blood robot. I can't be sure because nobody can explain it to me.
The whole thing with Rios getting arrested by ICE and being deported for not having an identification on him could, by the way, have been easily avoided if the crew would have followed the procedures for missions on pre-warp civilizations, which includes also investigating methods of identification and counterfeiting such identifications. In that case, Rios could just have provided his ID spit out by the replicator. But as he mentioned, they're just a group of misfits. What's really cool is that they actually set the pretext for the Zoom series, as I was hoping, by showing and mentioning that Dr. Zoom is actually already working on some kind of super soldiers, or is at least in the preface of creating Khan and his fellows.
You were running genetic experiments with a privatized military organization, spearhead operations on soldiers.
And they set already the conditions for Dr. Zoom actually experimenting with Indians, which is a requirement for a Khan Noonien Singh to happen, because Khan Noonien Singh is historically or canonically a Sikh and was born in India, according to the Star Trek lore. For that reason, he has to lose funding and be kept from keeping on his research in the United States, so that states like China, Russia, or India can take over his project and keep financing it.
Breaking the Senshin Convention has serious consequences.
Doing this for our children.
We have no choice but to revoke your license and your funding.
What's really cool here is that they actually resynchronize canon, the timeline of Star Trek, with our real world history. Because in Star Trek canon, the Augment War, or the creation of Khan Noonien Singh, actually should already have happened. So according to Memory Alpha, the Augments rose to power and held dominance over a large portion of humanity beginning in the early 1990s. Among the most notorious of these superhuman conquerors was Khan Noonien Singh. As you maybe have noticed, we did not have a global dictatorship under a sword-swinging, crazy, genetically augmented Sikh yet. So it makes sense to put the creation of Khan Noonien Singh and his fellow Augments somewhere after current day, in order to resynchronize canon with which really happened in our real history, because otherwise we're in the situation that real life violates canon! And we don't want to have that, right? So it's a good chance to basically update canon so that it fits our actual reality and history. I really hope they go through with it and use this chance of Brent Spiner performing in his role as an ancestor of Noonien Singh, showing that he can pull off this current day genius who unleashed the worst nightmare of humankind onto the world while thinking that he's doing something great for mankind. It would be so interesting to see the development of Khan Noonien Singh and how a great idea turns into that absolute egomaniac, homicidal monster that kills James Tiberius Kirk's son. One thing which was a little bit irritating was that they casually threw in a conversation that they supposedly have all vaccine passport microchips implanted into them in the future. But that is not surprising, considering that most people are really militant vaccine advocates in Hollywood. So I just let it pass. While at first glance one could cringe at certain parts of the story in the further episodes, like for instance the very heavy focus on ICE and its aggressive deportation methods, or the focus on the homelessness crisis, on a second glance actually makes sense in the canonical context of Star Trek, considering that in 2024, due to an extreme homeless crisis and the formation of slums, the Bell riots happened. So the homeless crisis and the aggressiveness of the immigration department of the United States in the year 2024, historically, in the sense of Star Trek, actually makes sense. So what does that mean for the show? Is it awesome now? No, it's not awesome. There are more jokes which are not really dumb, like in Discovery. Really nicely placed jokes. I actually laughed a few times. They actually don't have like all this anachronistic crap anymore in the show, and they actually stick to what's canonically accepted. They try to fix it, and I have to give them that. They visibly are trying to fix the damage done by Kurtzman and his fellow hack writers for the last few years. And honor where honor is due. That's I really appreciate the efforts to go back to what we actually know and love as actual Star Trek. I know by now it might be very difficult to get all those fans back they alienated over the years and called them names. So a lot of trust has been lost and many people have been deeply hurt by how they have been treated by the producers of many of their beloved franchises, which have been dragged through the dirt. So that might be a real problem to fix the damage done over all those years. Time traveling, however, has the great potential to really fix the timeline and bring Star Trek back into its original shape, like making it so as if Burnham, Discovery, nothing of it happened. Already with their presence in that time, by for instance releasing a bunch of illegal immigrants back into the US, just due to the incompetence and their inability to follow Starfleet protocol and properly prepare for a mission on a pre-warp world, might already have made those changes to history which make the Star Trek universe become the one we love and want from TNG, TOS and Star Trek Enterprise, Voyager and DS9. Who knows? I'm really interested into seeing how they go from here into the third season, where they actually go back onto the USS Enterprise and go back to explore strange new worlds, seek out new life and new civilizations, and boldly go where no one has gone before. Maybe due to the influence in 2024, there are no ninja space elves, all the planets don't blow up, Kelvin timeline never happens, and so on and so forth. Maybe that's their attempt to finally clean up all the mess previous producers made and produce plain, simple, nice Star Trek. Because keep in mind that CBS and Paramount now have reunited, so they can basically use the full unlimited license and bring back proper Klingons, proper Vulcans, proper Romulans, and proper Ferengi. They're not anymore forced to be like 25% different. They can go back to making TNG or maybe just a totally new show, but this time in the look and feel of actual Star Trek as we love and want it. I'm curious, but what do you think? Do you think I'm just a victim of new Trek nostalgia bait and everything will go back to be shit after those few episodes? Or do you think that's finally the producers getting their ass up and cleaning up the mess previous producers caused? I'm curious to hear what you think down in the comments below. Please don't forget to share, like and subscribe, and see you all next time. Bye.